Undoubtedly, each of us has our own unique experience with grief and loss. However, having spent hundreds and probably thousands of hours exploring my own grief and loss and others through my therapy practice, I can confidently say that there are two elements that fuel everyone's grief experiences. Today, we will explore the concepts of grief blueprints and communication styles. My name is McRogers. Welcome to our small but mighty channel on YouTube, where our goal is to do grief differently. Please like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications bell so that YouTube will know that we are doing something important, so that YouTube knows that we are working at researching, supporting, and being with our grief. So let's start at the beginning. It is natural that what we learned as children shows up in our adulthood. This is also true where grief is concerned. I call this your grief blueprint. My grief blueprint came at a very early age. As a small child, I can remember being at school, and I recall having to be pulled out of class while watching a really sad movie about a dog dying. I was crying too hard. I was upsetting the other children. So not only now was I grief-stricken, I was also embarrassed. I felt ashamed. I learned that grief is too much, that public displays are not okay, and that grief needs to be shut down, that my grief was too much for others. Please never watch or show any kids the Disney movie called Old Yeller. Is anyone watching this old enough to remember that movie? Why does Disney need to break our hearts again and again and again? And then I was a little older, personally memories of a grandparent's death and an auntie's death were coming home in the middle of the school day after having been called down to the school office and finding the curtains closed at the house. This again reinforced the idea that grief needs to be hidden and isolated, not displayed. It was as though we were doing something wrong. To this day, I still hate closed curtains. Without overthinking it, can you share in the comments below what your early lessons in grief might have been about? Is there one early lesson that you can now see showing up in your navigating grief as an adult? Please share in the comments below so that we can all learn from one another's grief blueprint. Next, let's consider our communication styles. There is a lot of information that you can Google and search and read about communication styles. We tend to have an ingrained default communication style in our lives. They are often created upon internal-based belief systems. These are also likely a product of our childhood experiences. So these beliefs can be on the full spectrum of I don't have the right to ask for things for myself, all the way to the other end of the spectrum that I will take what I want from others because they are just wrong and I am right. The most commonly referenced communication styles are passive, aggressive, passive-aggressive, and assertive. Passive communication is a style in which individuals tend to avoid expressing opinions or feelings. They avoid protecting their rights and identifying and meeting their needs. As a result, passive individuals do not respond initially to hurtful or anger-inducing situations or times that they feel compromised. Instead, they allow grievances and annoyances to mount, usually unaware of the buildup, and once they hit that high tolerance level threshold, they are prone to explosive communication styles. The explosion is usually out of proportion to the actual triggering event or tipping point. And after the outburst or release, however, they then feel shame or guilt and confusion, so they return to being a passive communicator. Aggressive communication, on the other hand, is a style in which individuals express their feelings and their opinions, and they advocate for their needs, sometimes just their wants, in a way that ignores, diminishes, and violates the rights of others. Aggressive communicators are often verbally or emotionally and or physically abusive. The outcome of aggressive communication is that these individuals become alienated from others, they alienate themselves, they always blame others instead of owning their own issues, and thus are unable to mature. They remain stuck in those beliefs and that communication pattern. Now, passive-aggressive communication is so confusing, both for the communicator and the receiver. It is a style in which individuals appear passive on the surface, but are really operating on an anger in a subtle, indirect, or behind-the-scenes way. They are what we call the wolf in the sheep's clothing. It is so hard to discern sometimes whether you are loving or attacking. Everything is cloaked. Everything has a double meaning. People who develop a pattern of passive-aggressive communication usually believe that they are powerless, that they are stuck, and that they are remaining resentful, and that will never change. They feel incapable of dealing directly with the object of their resentments, and instead they express their anger by subtly undermining the object, real or imagined, of their resentments. The impact of a pattern of passive-aggressive communication is that these individuals become alienated from those around them, even those who love them. They remain stuck in a position of powerlessness, and they discharge resentment while real issues are never addressed. They also remain unable to mature in their communication style. Assertive communication is a style in which individuals can clearly state their opinions and their feelings and firmly advocate for their rights and their needs without violating the rights of others. These individuals value themselves, their time, and their emotional, spiritual, and physical needs, and they are strong advocates for themselves. They're strong advocates for themselves while still remaining very respectful of the rights of others. The impact of a pattern of assertive communication is that these individuals feel connected to others, others feel connected to them, they feel in control of their lives, and they are able to mature because they address the issues and problems as they arise. They create a respectful environment for others to grow and mature around them also. While grieving, it is important to know and understand your communication style and how it is serving you or not. It is important to believe that while we are grieving, it may be helpful to try and challenge our communication styles in order to express and have our needs met. Our needs change while we're grieving, and therefore it only makes sense that our communication style may need to change as well. I understand that this is way easier said than done. However, knowledge is power, and knowing that we have options in how we want to communicate about our grief and needs, this allows us a fighting chance to have our emotional needs met and to keep some relationships well-boundaried and supportive. Allowing our grief to mature is the goal, so clearly trying to use assertive communication tools is also the goal. When grieving, our radar is so high also as to how others are communicating to us. So while you may have had patience or boundaries previously with certain people, family members, that may no longer exist while you are grieving. This is another place where our communication style will become challenged. How to meet others in their communication styles while they are watching us grieve. Communication while grieving is tricky. Do any of you have a positive experience to share in the comments about communication? Our grief blueprints and our communication styles are such important elements to consider in our grief work. If you are interested in exploring all things grief, think about joining our Grievolution Collective, which is our private online space to do grief differently. Find the link below in the comments and the description of this video. In your efforts to do your grief with knowledge as power about your grief blueprint and your communication style, I send you kind thoughts, kind words, and a kind heart. Thank you and take good care.